On a freezing morning, I watched a perfectly smooth-running car burn fuel like something was seriously wrong. No warning lights, no misfires, no obvious faults. Yet every start smelled heavy, the miles per gallon kept dropping, and the owner had already replaced parts that didn't fix a thing. Today, I am revealing the one hidden reason engines quietly start running rich, and why most drivers chase symptoms instead of the real cause that actually controls everything. On October 7, 2024, just before closing time in a small independent repair shop off a busy highway, a mid-sized sedan rolled into my bay smelling faintly of raw fuel. Nothing dramatic, no smoke, no misfires, no warning lights glowing on the dash. The driver was not panicked or angry, he was confused. He said his gas mileage had dropped sharply over the last few months. Same commute, same driving habits, same fuel. But he was filling up far more often, and it did not make sense. The car felt fine. And that sentence is always the one that makes experienced mechanics pause, because when a car feels fine but something is clearly wrong, you are not dealing with a mechanical failure. You are dealing with a system that is compensating. That car idled smoothly. Throttle response was clean. Acceleration felt normal. No shaking, no hesitation, no roughness that would trigger immediate suspicion. If you drove it for 5 minutes, you would swear it was healthy. And that is exactly why this problem is so dangerous. When an engine runs rich, it does not usually announce itself with noise or drama. It hides behind normal behavior while quietly destroying efficiency and wearing parts that are never cheap to replace. Most drivers think running rich means something obvious. Black smoke, strong fuel smell, a misfiring engine. But modern engines do not behave that way. They are designed to protect themselves and mask problems as long as possible. When something pushes the air-fuel mixture too far toward rich, the engine control unit does not panic. It adapts, it trims, it smooths things out so the driver feels nothing. Power stays acceptable. Idle stays calm. The only thing that changes at first is how fast the fuel gauge drops. That is why people miss this for months, sometimes years. They blame fuel prices, they blame traffic, they blame winter blend gasoline. They assume the car is just getting older. Meanwhile, the engine is washing its cylinder walls with excess fuel, thinning the oil, loading the catalytic converter with unburned hydrocarbons, and building carbon in places it should never build. All without setting off a single warning light. Running rich is not just about wasting fuel. Excess fuel changes everything inside the engine. Oil dilution reduces lubrication strength. Spark plugs foul faster. Exhaust temperatures climb inside the catalytic converter, which is designed to handle heat but not prolonged overfueling. Over time, that heat destroys the catalyst internally. By the time the check engine light finally comes on, the damage has already been done. The repair bill then reflects years of quiet neglect, not a sudden failure. What makes this even more frustrating is that many drivers do everything right. They change oil on time, they replace filters, they use decent fuel, they fix obvious problems when lights appear, and still, the car slowly loses efficiency. That is because this issue does not come from neglect. It comes from trust. Modern cars trust their data absolutely. If the data is slightly wrong but still plausible, the system will keep adjusting around it forever. The driver that night kept repeating the same thing. It does not feel broken. And he was right. It was not broken. It was misinformed. Somewhere in the system, a component was feeding the engine control unit information that was just inaccurate enough to cause overcorrection, but not inaccurate enough to trigger a fault. That gray area is where most expensive automotive problems live now. This is the uncomfortable shift many drivers do not realize has already happened. Cars no longer fail loudly first. They fail quietly. Mechanical problems used to announce themselves with clunks, stalls, smoke, and grinding noises. Electronic and data-driven problems whisper. They show up as quirks, a little worse mileage, a faint fuel smell on cold starts, oil that smells slightly like gasoline, things that are easy to ignore and easy to rationalize away. Shops struggle with this too. Scan tools are designed to catch hard failures, not slow lies. A sensor that is completely dead sets a code. A wire that is broken sets a code. But a component that is drifting, aging, slowing down, or reporting delayed information often stays within range. On paper, everything looks fine. In reality, the engine is reacting to bad feedback hundreds of times per second. That is why so many people end up replacing parts that do not fix the problem. Spark plugs get blamed, injectors get suspected, fuel pumps get tested, sometimes parts get replaced out of desperation, and the car improves slightly, not because the root cause was fixed, but because the system balance shifted temporarily. Then the problem creeps back in. The mileage drops again. The frustration grows. The truth is, an engine does not decide to run rich on its own. It is instructed to. Every drop of extra fuel is injected because the engine control unit believes it is necessary, and the engine control unit only knows what its sensors tell it. If one critical input starts lying slowly, the engine will obey that lie faithfully. This is why running rich is one of the most misunderstood conditions in modern cars. It does not feel like a failure. It feels like normal aging. And that assumption costs drivers thousands of dollars over the life of a vehicle. By the time the driver in my shop noticed the problem, the car had been compensating for months. The system had adapted so well that it hid the truth from him completely. But data leaves fingerprints if you know where to look. And once you understand how and why engines quietly start running rich, you stop guessing and start seeing patterns that most drivers never notice. Because this problem does not start with fuel, it starts with trust. And once that trust is misplaced, everything downstream pays the price. The first step to understanding why an engine runs rich without throwing a warning light is accepting something most drivers never hear. The engine control unit, or ECU, is not trying to be smart. It is trying to be obedient. It does not judge information. It does not question trends. It reacts to what it believes is true, over and over, hundreds of times per second. When one key input becomes slightly unreliable, the ECU does not fail. It adapts in exactly the wrong direction. Inside every modern engine is a constant balancing act. Air comes in, fuel is injected, combustion happens, exhaust leaves, sensors measure the result and report back. That loop never stops. The goal is stoichiometry, the ideal air-fuel ratio where combustion is clean, powerful, and efficient. If the ECU believes the mixture is lean, it adds fuel. If it believes the mixture is rich, it pulls fuel. Simple in theory, dangerous in practice when the feedback is delayed or distorted. The most important thing to understand is that most sensors do not fail abruptly. They age, they slow down, they get coated in carbon, oil vapor, moisture, or residue. Their readings drift just enough to stay plausible, and that is the danger. A completely failed sensor sets a code. A drifting sensor slowly rewrites the behavior of the entire engine. This is where the hidden reason engines run rich begins to take shape. It is not a fuel problem. It is not a mechanical fault. It is a trust problem between the ECU and a sensor that is still talking, but no longer telling the full truth. When the ECU believes the engine is running lean, it enriches the mixture to protect the engine. Manufacturers program this behavior intentionally. Running slightly rich is safer than running lean. Lean mixtures increase combustion temperature and risk engine damage. Rich mixtures feel smooth, quiet, and forgiving. That is why an engine running rich often feels fine. The system is choosing safety over efficiency without telling the driver. Over time, this decision has consequences. Excess fuel does not just burn and disappear. It changes the environment inside the engine. Fuel washes oil off the cylinder walls. It sneaks past the piston rings and dilutes the oil. It alters combustion temperatures. It overloads the catalytic converter with hydrocarbons it was never meant to process continuously. The ECU does not see this damage happening. It only sees numbers it thinks are accurate. What makes this worse is long-term fuel trim memory. Modern engine control units do not just react in the moment. They learn. If the system believes it must add fuel consistently to maintain balance, it saves that correction as normal behavior. Short-term adjustments become long-term assumptions. The engine stops fighting the problem and starts living with it. That is when rich running becomes invisible. This is why many drivers experience a slow, steady decline instead of a sudden failure. Fuel economy drops gradually, oil darkens faster, cold starts to smell stronger, but nothing crosses a threshold dramatic enough to trigger panic. And because nothing feels broken, the driver keeps driving. Shops often miss this because scan tools report within range. The numbers do not scream failure. Fuel trims might be elevated, but not extreme. Sensors might respond, but sluggishly. Without knowing how fast or how clean a signal should be, the data looks acceptable. The engine is compensating, so symptoms stay muted. The car becomes a master at hiding its own problem. One of the most overlooked contributors to rich running is voltage instability. Modern sensors and control modules are incredibly sensitive to voltage. A weak battery, corroded grounds, or a fluctuating charging system can skew sensor readings without causing a complete failure. A momentary voltage drop during cold start can corrupt learned data. The engine control unit adapts to a condition that no longer exists and never lets go. Driving patterns amplify this problem. Short trips prevent full warm-up. Cold engines run richer by design. If the engine rarely reaches full operating temperature, the engine control unit spends most of its life in enrichment mode. Over time, that becomes the baseline. The system learns around bad conditions and assumes they are normal. Then there is contamination. Oil vapor from the crankcase ventilation system slowly coats sensors. Fuel quality varies. Moisture accumulates. None of this breaks anything immediately. It just degrades accuracy. And accuracy is everything in a system that relies on precise feedback. The hidden reason engines run rich is not neglect. It is gradual misinformation. A sensor that is still talking, a computer that still trusts it, and an engine that obeys every instruction it is given. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, even as it quietly creates expensive consequences. And here is the most important part. Replacing random parts does not fix this. You can install new spark plugs, clean injectors, change filters, and still run rich if the engine control unit is acting on bad assumptions. Until the system is forced to relearn reality, it will continue to make the same decisions. This is why understanding the cause matters more than chasing symptoms. Running rich is not a failure mode. It is a behavior. And behaviors can be changed, but only if you know what is driving them. Because once you see how easily an engine can be convinced it is starving when it is not, the next question becomes unavoidable. How do you prove it? How do you expose the lie the system believes? And how do you reset the engine's understanding of reality without replacing parts that were never broken? That is where everything finally comes together. By the time most drivers reach this point, they are already frustrated. They have replaced parts. They have changed fuel brands. They have followed advice that sounded logical but never fixed the problem. The engine still smells rich. The miles per gallon are still low. Cold starts still feel heavy, and yet nothing is wrong enough to trigger a clear diagnosis. This is where the final piece matters, because fixing a rich running engine is not about adding anything, it is about removing false assumptions. The most important thing to understand is that an engine running rich is often stuck in a protective mindset. The ECU believes it is saving the engine from harm. It is not malicious, it is cautious. And once that behavior becomes learned, it will not correct itself on its own. Time does not heal it. New fuel does not heal it. Gentle driving does not heal it. Only one thing does: forcing the system to stop trusting old data and relearn from clean inputs. This is why resets work when nothing else does. Not because they are magical, but because they interrupt the feedback loop. When adaptive memory is cleared correctly, fuel trims reset, idle control relearns, sensor baselines are recalibrated. The ECU goes back into observation mode instead of compensation mode. For the first time in months or even years, the engine starts responding to what is actually happening instead of what it thinks is happening. But here is where many people go wrong. They reset without preparing the environment. A reset is not a fix by itself. It is a window. If you reset and immediately feed the system bad data again, it will relearn the same mistake even faster. This is why some drivers say resets did nothing. They did the reset, then started the engine with a weak battery, dirty air filter, contaminated sensor, or unstable idle, and taught the ECU the wrong lesson all over again. To break the cycle, the engine must be given a clean baseline. That means stable voltage, a healthy battery, clean grounds, no obvious vacuum leaks, a clean air intake path. You are not fixing everything. You are simply removing obvious sources of misinformation. Once that is done, the reset becomes powerful. After a proper reset, the engine should be allowed to idle calmly. No throttle, no revving. This is not superstition. This is how the engine control unit establishes reference points. It measures airflow, idle speed, temperature rise, and sensor response without load. This is the moment where the engine relearns how to breathe correctly. Rush it, and you corrupt the process. Driving after the reset matters just as much. Smooth acceleration, steady cruising, no hard pulls, no aggressive inputs. You are teaching the system what normal looks like. Within a short time, fuel trims begin to settle. Exhaust smell lightens. Throttle response becomes more linear. Fuel economy starts creeping back. Not suddenly, quietly. This is also the moment where truth reveals itself. If the engine was running rich due to learned behavior, the improvement will be noticeable and persistent. If the engine was running rich due to a physical fault, the symptoms will return quickly. That distinction is priceless, because now you know. You are no longer guessing, you are diagnosing. This is why professional technicians use resets as filters, not miracles. They reset to separate software behavior from hardware failure. Most drivers skip this step and jump straight to replacement. That is how money disappears without results. There is also a long-term lesson here that most people never learn. Engines do not drift into rich operation randomly. They are pushed there by conditions. Short trips, weak batteries, dirty sensors, infrequent maintenance. If those conditions remain, the problem will come back. Not because the fix failed, but because the cause was never removed. This is why some engines run perfectly for 300,000 miles, while others feel tired at 100,000. The difference is not luck. It is information quality. Engines that receive clean, consistent data age gracefully. Engines that live in confusion adapt themselves into inefficiency. Once you understand this, everything changes. You stop reacting emotionally to warning signs. You stop assuming the worst. You stop throwing parts at symptoms. you start asking better questions. Is the engine reacting, or is it remembering? Is this behavior new or learned? Did something change before the problem appeared? An engine running rich is not a death sentence. It is a message. It is the system saying that it does not trust what it is seeing. Your job is not to fight it. Your job is to show it the truth again. And here is the part that most people find uncomfortable. The fix that restores fuel economy, smooth starts, and clean combustion often costs nothing. No parts, no additives, no upgrades, just understanding how modern engines think and knowing when to interrupt the loop. That is why this issue hides so well. There is nothing dramatic to sell, no broken component to point at, just logic that drifted quietly and stayed there. Once you have seen it happen, you cannot unsee it. You will recognize the signs immediately. The car that feels fine but drinks fuel. The engine that runs smooth but smells heavy. The cold start that never quite cleans up. These are not mysteries. They are learned behaviors waiting to be erased. And if there is one final thing to remember, it is this. Engines do not lie. Sensors do. Data drifts. Computers adapt. And unless someone steps in to reset the story, the engine will keep believing the same wrong idea forever. Now you know how to change that.